Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Shop Talk Quinny podcast. My name is Joshua Edwards. I'm your host, owner, and CEO of OSM and the founder of Shop Talk Quinny. And today I have a very special guest, a dear friend of mine, and also my business coach. His name is Bryan Emmerson. And Bryan, might I say, it's a pleasure to have you on the show this morning. Obviously, it's been a long road of that we've had together, great relationship, and so many tips and things that I've learned from you, since we started working together. And I wanted to come on here and share with my audience, my tribe today, some of that value that you've been able to give to me over the years. So what I'd like to do is for you to take the next 30 seconds to a minute just to kind of give everybody a brief, who you are, where you're from, and what you do.
Well, thanks, Josh. It's a pleasure to be with you as well. My name is Bryan Emmerson. I'm a business coach, have been for over a decade. In a previous life, I was an executive in my family's business. For those of you in the Quincy area that may know of Emmerson Packaging, used to be called Polycello. I was chief chief operating officer for that organization. And started in sales, went to project accountant, then I got into management as a factory supervisor, then plant manager, then VP operations, and finally chief operating officer. And I was involved in buying and setting up the plant that we have here in town. We've got about 100 employees here, over 400 employees in our main plant in Nova Scotia. And so for the last 10 years, I've been working with business owners to help them achieve their goals in a much faster time than they would otherwise. I like to say, Josh, that I like to work with successful people. I can do rescues, but I prefer to work with businesses that are already highly successful, and I just want to help them take their business to the next level. They will get there with or without me. They'll just get there faster with me. It's the analogy I like to use is that of a sports car. Think of a Ferrari. You're driving at night, and these folks, men and women, have these wonderful companies. They're a highly tuned sports car. They got the window rolled down. They got a flashlight out the window, and they're driving 4 miles an hour. And I'm not daylight. I'm not God, but I am high beams, and I'm a GPS. So I've been down the road before. I know where the turns are, where the potholes are, and we can just help these business owners open it up and see what this machine will do. So that's the analogy I like to use. It's, I can see it far enough down the road that we can make some serious headway, and I have an idea where we're going. So that's the whole GPS tie-in. Anyway, It's an analogy I like to use to describe what I do.
That's awesome, Bryan. That was certainly one thing that really stuck out to me when we started working together was like, the concept of, as an entrepreneur, we're going to get to where we want to go regardless. But in your role and what you particularly help business owners with is getting them there faster than they would on their own, which was certainly something that was attractive to me because I got places to go and things to do. And I figured, who better to have come alongside where, than somebody who's been there, done that, got the T-shirt, and they're able to help me succeed and get to where I need to go faster than I would on my own. So Bryan, I want to jump right in here because my goal, my focus is always to provide as much value to my audience, my tribe as possible. And one thing has really been coming up in my conversations with other entrepreneurs is, how do we continue to look for opportunities to thrive in business? And, coming out of this pandemic, coming out of a time where there was a lot of uncertainty and now kind of looking at the pieces around us now, and it's like, okay, how do we bring everything together and move forward? So a particular question I want to ask is based on your experience, because I know you're coaching a lot of these entrepreneurs right now. And what I really want to dig deep into is maybe a few examples that you can share of some challenges, maybe they're common, maybe they're unique, that you're experiencing as a business coach right now over the last 12, 16 months? And what do those challenges look like, Bryan? And what are some opportunities that you see for entrepreneurs that are facing these challenges?
Well, Josh, the reason that I have a job as a coach is that the challenges are different. And to your listeners, there will be some things that will resonate with different people. And I said to you earlier offline, I said, it's a standard MBA answer. It depends. And the thing about, but we can kind of put things in different silos. Like, for example, some people's needs, some business needs sales. They just, they've got the structure underneath them, and it works well. They just got to feed the beast. And so, for example, I have a client that is like that. And what he needs to do is spend time selling. Well, he was spending a lot of his time doing other things in the organization. And so what we do in that case, we're looking at how do we free up his time? Well, these are the questions are kind of fairly simple. And sometimes the answer is just light bulb comes on. Other times we got to dig deeper. And, I like pulling lines out of movies, and my kind of a paraphrase I like out of Jurassic Park is, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Mm-hmm. And so Brian Tracy has a line that I like. He says, there's never enough time to do everything, but always enough time to do the most important thing. So then it comes down to prioritizing. So in that particular case, we had to look at what was the priority for that owner, because he was the guy that was responsible for sales. Well, how do we free him up to do what he does best so he can feed the beast and grow the organization? Another challenge that business owners can have is in their processes. And so that can be something like a computer system. I've got a client that is going through that right now. He recently went through a building expansion to build out his capacity. But then as we're going through our coaching sessions, we realize, well, he needs to have a more robust enterprise system to make it work. Now, that's not me. I'm not a computer consultant, but I was able to work with him to help him recognize that need, and then put him onto that track. When you're looking at our processes, you need to right size them for the organization. For example, when I started with my family business, it used to be called Polycello, now it's called Emmerson Packaging. And we were about a $20 million company. And we're well north of 100 million now. And so what worked then, if we were to use that same system now, we would have so much detail slipping off the table, falling through the cracks, we'd be out of business. So we had to change. And it's not about bigger is better, because if we were using back then what we do now, we would be so overcome with process and bureaucracy that we'd be choked out of business. So you've got to be right sized for the business. What works for a new entrepreneur that's $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 in sales may not work when he's $1.5 million. That may not work when he's $5 or $10 million. And I, from my example, what worked at 20 didn't work at 40. We had to make a shift. Didn't work at 80. We had to make a shift. So you got to right size those processes. One of the things that I do as a coach is I'm asking the question before it happens. Mm-hmm. Can we grow the business by 40, 50% without the wheels falling off it? Of course, there is no right answer to that, because if you say, well, no, I can handle 50%, well, then you're overstaffed. You've got too much capacity. And the answer is no, well, then we've got work to do. But taking the staff away, if your system can't handle a 40 or 50% growth, and you know that now, let's fix it before we get there, so that when it happens, you're able to continue your growth. Your growth continues as opposed to level off. As I said, you're going to get there by yourself, with or without me. One of the values that a coach brings is you ask the questions ahead of time, because the business owner is so knee deep in the hoopla, so to speak, that many times he doesn't take the time to ask himself these questions. And even if he does, having that second set of eyes, the outsider that looks in and asks the silly questions sometimes. Well, sometimes those questions aren't so silly. They're not as obvious to the person that is so entrenched in the business that he can't ask the objective questions.
So, Bryan, let me ask you this then, because you've brought up something here that's very, very, I think, important for our listeners. And interestingly enough, I put out a post on LinkedIn yesterday, and it was a series called "Would You Rather?" And in that series, the question that was being asked as of yesterday was, what do you prefer to do if you had to make a choice of what you could do full time in your business? And I said, would you rather work on your business or would you rather work in your business? And some entrepreneurs didn't understand the concept. They didn't even know the difference between the two. But a lot of what you're talking about right now is working on the business. Explain to myself and our listeners today, what does working on the business mean to you? And where are you working with entrepreneurs in that level as far as, helping them thrive in their business today?
Well, Michael Gerber, in his book, The E-Myth Revisited, I think really gives some insight into this. He talked about the three I's, not me, myself, and I, but the I's of the business owner. And he said the first I is the entrepreneur. That I is looking forward into the future, asking questions like, what if? Where are we going? How are we going to get there? What are the obstacles in place? That kind of thing. The second I is the I of the manager. And that I is looking in the past, asking questions like, what happened? What do we do well? How do we do more of it? What do we do poorly? How do we fix it? The third I is the I of the technician. That I is knee deep in the hoopla, and that's the working in the business. They're just putting out fires, answering questions, trying to keep the fingers in the dike. Maybe there is a process problem, and the manager is able to keep it on track by, I guess, keep the fingers in the dike to keep the water back. Well, what the statistics have shown that at least 80% of a small business owner's time is spent in that third eye, the technician. As a coach, I spend most of my time in the first eye. That looking ahead, where we're going, how we're going to get there, to change the business from what it is now, to allow it to or prepare it for that growth that's coming. Occasionally, we'll drop down to the second eye. If a client has an issue, say with a personnel issue, we'll go through that. Or if they, maybe there's a gap with their knowledge of finance and understanding the numbers. Well, we can take a little time and go through that as well. But primarily, that's where the coach spends his time, is in that first eye, because it's so natural. So, for example, if you have an HVAC company, I'll use that example because I don't have an HVAC company as a client. But if you have an owner that is, in the van running around doing client calls, that's working in the company. If you say, well, no, hey, I don't do that anymore. I hire guys. No, I'm doing the scheduling. That's still in the company. That's running the day-to-day of the company. That is not second and third eye.
Let me ask you this, Bryan.
Yeah.
So, you work with, I know you work with a lot of different entrepreneurs across the board in multiple different industries, but, from your vantage point, because I'm really interested in your perspective here, are you noticing that there's, if you had to kind of pinpoint the percentage of entrepreneurs that you're working with, how many of them would you say are in that third eye level?
Actually, Josh, the statistics, when you say 80%, that's generous. It's probably closer to 98% of business owners spend their time in the third eye, or a high percentage spend 98% of their time doing it. I had one client I started working with him, and I noticed just this big pile of on his desk. And so, tell me, what is that? Help me understand. And he said, well, he went through, this is the documents that he went through in a day, and it was all third eye stuff. And he doesn't do any of that now. In fact, this guy he spends the vast majority of his time in first and second eye tasks, and he is continuously pushing forward his business. He has, now that didn't happen overnight. That's something that you've got to have you can't just get rid of these tasks that are necessary for your business. You've got to have you've got to maybe people to hand things off to. Maybe you have processes that are automated. Again, it gets back to the original answer. It depends. Every on the one hand, sometimes you hear once in a while, well, my business is unique. How can you possibly help me? Well, on the one hand, every business is unique because it's got their own unique issues. On the other hand, all businesses are the same because all businesses at that first eye level, the questions are all the same. The answers are entirely different, and that takes us down a different path. But those strategic questions, who are we? What do we serve? Who's our clients? Where are we going? What's the obstacles? But who's our competition? What are their strengths compared to what ours are? Those strategic questions, every business has to ask, and if they don't, they do so at their own risk.
Wow. So, we're talking about thriving here as an entrepreneur, and I'm sensing from this conversation, and I'm certainly learning this from my sessions with you, is the more time you are able to spend in the first eye of the entrepreneur, if you're really wanting to thrive in a big way, you have to spend some time up there. But you're saying only 2%, and that thoughtfully are spending their time in the first eye.
What happens is a lot of time people get into businesses because they just like it. They like doing the stuff, that third eye, and that's awesome because that gives you passion. If I can back up, in my previous life as an executive, I'm not sure how it happened. I don't know if word got out, but there was a number of small business owners kind of beat a path to my door, and they just, friends and then friends of friends would just ask me questions. And what became obvious to me is that these folks struggle with stuff that was pretty straightforward to me. And it's not because I'm not much smarter than anybody else. In addition to a formal education in business, I've got an MBA, but my business background, I'm a third generation business owner myself now. And growing up around the dining room table with my dad, who was always long-term, big picture type of questions. But even more than that, I was surrounded by business executives that wanted my success, and they poured into my career. So what became fairly straightforward to me, these folks struggled with. And so that gave me that's one of the reasons I'm in coaching, because it gave me a passion for small business owners. These folks love to do what they do, but they didn't have this advantage that I did of the growing up in a business family and the formal education and great mentors, and they're just doing the best they can. And like I said, I like to deal with highly successful business. They figured it out. They're good at what they do, but that doesn't mean that they're good at what their business does. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're have excellent business practices. They've figured a lot of it out through, as one of my mentors said, skin in your knees and bumping your elbows. But there is and you can learn it that way. It's just going to take you a little longer, and that's going to cost you. Having a business coach is going to cost you, but I promise you, having a business coach is a lot less costly. When I first started coaching, Harvard Business Review said that the payback on a business coach was 500%. In other words, 5 times what you invest. Since then, Forbes has come out and said, no, it's 700%, up to 49 times, but average is 700% or seven times or 700%.
Wow.
So these folks are going to get there. They're just going to just have to figure out which way they want to go. And if they, I believe that everybody needs a coach of some sort, and it might not be, a guy like me. It might be a board of advisors. It might be, you might have some great mentors, but no, nothing happens in a vacuum. Isaac Newton said, if I saw farther than others, it's because I stood on the shoulders of giants. We need to surround ourselves with giants, with people that can help us see a little bit past the horizon. And that's my role. But it's not the answer for everybody. In fact, not everybody's coachable.
You know what? If I can be a little vulnerable here, because I think this will be very, very, insightful to the people that are going to be listening to this. I had a challenge in my business, and with that challenge, I started looking inward. I started looking at, my expenses. They were piling up, and I came to you. I came to Bryan, and I said, what should I do about this? And you said something that was super, super profound to me. And, I was focused on my expenses. And then you just said something super simple that was like, well, what's the better use of your time and energy? And what do you think is less stressful for you? And you said it very, very simply. You just said, is it less stressful for you to just focus on getting more sales? Or is it going to be less stressful for you to focus on, the expenses? And I said, it's going to be less, stressful going after more sales. And you said, well, then that's what you should focus on. It was so simple, but I would have missed it without you. That happens a lot in your world, doesn't it?
It does. And, you just never know what's going to stick. And, it's my wife's Italian, and so we don't really do this, but it's kind of a figure of speech. It's like throwing spaghetti against the wall and see if it sticks while it's ready to eat. We don't do that in my house, but I use that analogy as I throw stuff against the wall and see if it sticks. And the best lessons are caught, not taught. So we as we're having these conversations, sometimes the light bulb just comes on and say, that's it. And see, Josh, you know your business far better than I do. And all my clients know their business better than I do. And so most of the time the solutions come from them. It just needs to be framed in a way that makes sense to them. And what you're talking about there is it ties into the theory of constraints, which says that there's three things in your business you want to watch out for: throughput, inventory, and cost, in that order. And you were focusing on the third one, cost. And you want to walk over a nickel or walk over a dollar trying to find a nickel. Well, no, let's go get the dollar. And in fact, you have more fun doing it anyway. That's part of what I do too, is reduce the stress of a business owner, because a business is stressful enough, with the financial risk of owning it. You're responsible for your own well-being. You're responsible for the well-being of your employees. That's stressful, but there are stresses that business owners take upon themselves unnecessarily, and part of my role is to reduce that.
Wow, that's certainly relevant in the times that we live in, Bryan. I remember 12 months ago when this all kind of broke out, and everybody was kind of like, what's gonna happen here, and lots of stress. I think personally I experienced the most anxiety in business I've ever experienced. But you said something that's powerful there. You help reduce stress, and talk a little bit quickly about how you do that, and what it's allowed business owners to go on and do as a result.
Well, I think, if you have to go to the store and you need to get a couple things, you just go. I don't know about you, but if I've got more than 3 or 4 things, especially if I've got multiple places to go, I write it down, because I don't trust myself to remember. if I've got 8 things to get at 4 different stores and I don't write it down, I got at least a 50-50 chance I'm going to miss something. So I just make a list. And so when you make a list, it just allows you to take a breath. When you write out your issues, getting them all on paper, you think, okay, I've got all this stuff to do, this to-do list. When you write it down, it's only 4 things. Well, it seemed like a lot more when it was bouncing inside my head. I think the same thing is true when it comes to when you're thinking about your issues in your business. Having a sounding board to talk it out, I think that in and of itself takes out the risk.
Mm-hmm.
When the sounding board happens to be somebody that's been down the road several times before, the way I describe it is, if you've got an idea and it can handle my pressure test, it's probably a good idea, because I'm going to poke at it. Sometimes it's good as is. Sometimes, banging it around, we make it better. Sometimes, no, we have, that wasn't as we think it through, that wasn't the best way to go. And we end up going a different direction, or at least we know not to go in that direction. We got to figure out, in maybe subsequent sessions, we got to figure out maybe a better way. But right. That reduces stress. To having a guide. Several years ago, I took a motorcycle trip with my father in Europe, and we had a guide. And that's the first time I ever had a guide on a trip like that. We've gone on 2 subsequent trips, and we've gone with the same guide, because what he offered for us to try to to go through the plan of the places that we were going to go, we would have missed so much. Having a guide that's been down the road before made all the difference. And we didn't have to think about where we're going. We just followed the guy on the lead motorcycle. And we all got to where we're going. We all had a great time. We saw all the sights that we never would have seen by ourselves. And so, having a guide in your business takes away stress. And another thing that my clients have told me is that because I'm in several different industries, there's some cross-pollination that occurs. That something that's very common with you, Josh, is not common in another industry. And so I've worked with Josh. I said, well, I talked to my other guy and I say, here's an idea that other clients have found helpful, and it's a light bulb. This is amazing, because nobody in his entire industry does that, or vice versa. I may bring a manufacturing idea to OSM.
Yeah, and that's been certainly helpful.
Nobody in your field does that, but yeah. And so doing that, knowing you've got a leg up on your competition takes stress away. So
100%.
Yeah.
I totally agree, Bryan. And it's been super, super helpful. Like, and it happens often where we'll be chatting and then all of a sudden just the light bulb goes on and it's like, oh, I could be focusing on this and that. And it helps to center me back to, what I need to be focusing on, what's important, and the end goal in mind. Bryan, we could talk for hours. I'm so appreciative of your time today and being able to chat with you. Bryan, let people know quickly where they can find you. You've certainly been a huge help and mentor to me and so many other business owners. But if somebody wants to get in touch with you, where do they go to find you?
My website is claritybusinesscoaching.ca. And there's the traditional ribbon across the top. You want to see about Bryan, you want to learn a bit about me, that's fine. Down at the bottom, you'll see, and by the way, plug for Josh, this was the website that his team built for me. Where do you identify yourself? Are you a business owner who wants to take yourself to the next level? Do you, are you you bought a business, but you're not the founder? Maybe there's somebody in your organization that could use some executive coaching. And the difference here is business coaching is working on your business. Executive coaching is working on you, to just give you more tools for your tool belt. I've often said, if all you have is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. So, maybe you need a set of screwdrivers, and I'll show you how to use them. So take a look, claritybusinesscoaching.ca. The name Clarity is what it's about. It's when you clear the fog away, you get focus. Josh, I just want to say a thank you to you. This has been a pleasure, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you and your folks. And I'm very pleased to be part of your tribe too.
Fantastic, Bryan. It's such a pleasure. Thank you so much again. We'll put the link below to Bryan's website in the video so you guys can go check him out. Thanks again, Bryan, for your time.
Thank you.